everyone, and welcome to the Her Hoops Stats Podcast Network. I'm Chelsea Lay, and I'm joined today by Richard Cohen, of course, of the Her Hoops Stats staff. And first of all, welcome to this new podcast format. We announced yesterday on the kind of last official episode of the press break that Her Hoops Stats is moving into a at least daily Monday to Friday podcast format for the WNBA season. So we're so excited to dive into more news, more stats, more games, more basketball in general. So we're kind of transitioning into that schedule heading into the end of this week and starting next week. So thank you so much for joining us in this period of transition. So today we are going to dive into our Her Hoop Stats ranking the W rankings. So we're going to link the articles, the corresponding articles below. So if you want to see the full rankings or kind of the profiles that have already come out on Her Hoop Stats, make sure to check out the links below and subscribe to our newsletter. It comes right into your inbox every single day. And so we're going to dive in. I think the way that we've decided to frame this is to talk about the changes from 2025 to 2024. So Richard, maybe this is your first, I guess, introduction to the Her Hoop Stats listeners. I know they know my voice pretty well, but I don't know if you want to kind of dive into your basketball background quickly, just so they have a little bit of an idea of where you're coming from. But I'm super excited to be hosting with you today.
Unlike lots of people that we have working at Her Hoop Stats, my basketball background is just watching lots of it. You know, there's no coaching, there's very little playing apart from when I was a dreadful player in London back in the 90s, 2000, mostly 90s. It's from watching and writing about the WNBA for the last 20-25 years, which is horrifying. The last few days we've been working on releasing all of the ranking W results, which have been put together from tens of thousands of votes from hundreds of different journalists, including all of our people, but lots of people from other media outlets from all over the WNBA sort of media coverage sphere. People you would have heard of and people you probably haven't, but lots of people.
Exactly. That's a good point. So to explain to anybody who doesn't know how the rankings work, so basically the kind of like system is sent out to all these people that Richard was talking about, and you basically get it asks you a bunch of questions. So like, who's better than this player, or like which of these two players are better, and you just kind of click through it a bunch, and then at the end it spits out the like ranking based on everybody's votes. So it's not like a situation where everybody's saying, okay, I think this player's first, second, third. Like, you're not making your own ranking. It's kind of the like algorithm that are very wonderful and smart computer people that I could never be, but our Her Hoop Stats smart computer people that I am very appreciative of figure out, and then it just kind of like comes up with a ranking based on everybody's votes. So we're not sitting here saying like each person has ranked this. So if you're mad about where your people are, don't be mad. So yeah, that's kind of a good way to go into that. So that's how we decide these rankings. So it's curious. I'm looking at this change in rank from this year to last year, and it's actually wild how many changes in the top 10 there are from this year based on last year. So to start, I mean, the top three is different than last year. In 2024, ranking the W was Asia Wilson was first, then Alyssa Thomas, and then Breanna Stewart. So this year, it's still Asia Wilson, Breanna Stewart came in second, and Nafisa Collier is in third. And Alyssa Thomas went from second to sixth. So let's start there with the top three. And just maybe, Richard, what do you think about the change in that? And like, do you agree with that top three in Wilson, Stewart, and then Collier?
Well, I wrote in the article, I think Wilson at 1 is the easiest pick on the board. And apart from like the huge fans of maybe the three people below her, I don't think an awful lot of people would argue with that placement. She was incredible already and then got better, which was ridiculous last year. Yeah, and shows no sign of stopping for now. She also never gets hurt. Touch wood. I don't think there's any argument there. I think Thomas Thomas is obviously still very good. I think probably the drop off in scoring was what led to the fall there. That she was like the year before, she was obviously right in the middle of MVP conversations for 2 years in a row. And then last year, she really wasn't, partly because her scoring dropped to nearly below double digits, which probably led to that. And then Stewart maybe sort of moved up by default because of Thomas dropping. But then the main argument with Stewart at 2, from that we've heard from many of the comments that have come below since we've revealed the results, is that a lot of people think Collier should have been above Stewart, which I can totally understand given how she played for Minnesota last season and then how she played it unrivaled in the off season as well. So you can
Yeah.
understand the movement, but yeah, I mean, as I say, this was created by a large panel of voters, and it does not necessarily reflect exactly where I would put everyone, which a lot of people don't seem to realize when they're replying to tweets about the
Comment.
list or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I agree with you. I definitely think that Collier has an argument to be second on that list. I think the thing that really stands out to me is the trend that we're seeing here of these like very dominant, versatile forwards and like almost like post players who are at the top of these conversations. I mean, we're seeing it across basketball as a whole right now, that like that is the type of player that is most successful when it comes to this like new, not, I wouldn't say positionless, because I wouldn't say the WNBA is necessarily positionless, but into this new kind of versatile era of basketball that we're seeing where, as a forward, you have to be able to play, in the post, you have to be able to defend the rim, you have to be able to, score close to the basket, but you also need to be able to move outside of that. You need to have a good mid range, which I know Asia Wilson is like the absolute master of that. And then you also need to be able to shoot from distance, you need to be able to pass, handle the ball. And I think when you think about Wilson, Stewart, and Collier up there, and of course like Alyssa Thomas is in that conversation as well, triple double queen over there, it's those type of players that are always like coming up on these top rankings, these players that can basically play anywhere on the floor, that are tall, lengthy, athletic, can shoot, just like have a variety of talent. Like they're just like peak athleticism. So it's interesting to see. And then of course, I think what a lot of people are kind of touchy about is the fact that Caitlin Clark came in fourth. Different kind of player than what I was just describing, but still incredibly talented in her own right. But again, we didn't pick this ourselves, but Caitlin Clark comes in fourth. So I mean, based on what I was just saying about the type of player that tends to run the court these days, where does Caitlin Clark kind of, you know, play out in that sense to you?
Well, I do think there's sort of we had a generation pretty much that came through where it was dominated by these sort of fours and sort of mobile forwards. And
Mhm.
maybe now we're going to have a generation of guards. We've got obviously Clark coming through, and then we got Paige Beckers coming in this year. Maybe Juju coming in soon as well to sort of add to that. So it does seem to come in waves where you get sort of a certain type of player that maybe they were all sort of inspired by the same person when they were growing up, or whatever it was that led to these. Maybe it's just a freak of genetics the way it all works out. But
Yeah.
and then with Clark, I don't think she was ever getting any higher than fourth. Partly
Mhm.
because what you see in our voting, both last year and this year, is that the body of work matters to our voters, at least to a certain extent. You need to have backed it up for more than one season to really prove yourself. And Clark jumping to fourth off one season, plus obviously everything in college and everything else before that, but only one season as a pro. Yeah, I don't think she was ever getting higher than that with a full panel. You would have needed a lot of her fans to be throwing in their weight into the voting process to get any higher. But who
I
knows?
mean,
By the end of the season, I mean, she's supposedly the MVP candidate, the
yeah,
MVP favorite. If you
the
listen to
vote,
the
the
voting,
betting odds one, the betting
yeah.
odds, for those who are wondering, yeah, she has the highest betting odds right now to win. And I mean, you can take what you want from that, whether it's them wanting to get her people's money or whatever, but
Yeah.
she is up there. Like, I would say she is in the conversation regardless. I think Wilson is at the top of that. I think Caitlin Clark has a good case if she is to, you know, develop her game in the way that it's trending from this year to last year. But I also think Nafisa Collier is up there as well. So it's going to be an interesting season. But I mean, Caitlin Clark is fourth, but she did jump from 27th in 2024 to fourth. So, like you said, that big jump is, I think, just like an indication of the way that she was able to very seamlessly transition into the WNBA, especially on a team that was very young, that their coaching staff wasn't like they've leveled up this year. Like, I think this year she's going to be even better because she's surrounded by, a winning coach. She has a lot of experience around her. But you're right. Like, I mean, when you're talking about Wilson Stewart and Collier, like, again, it's that type of player. And Caitlin Clark is a great shooter and great facilitator, great point guard. The defense can use a little bit of work. The turnovers. That's something that we're looking for to see an improvement on this season, which I don't. I don't think that not going to do that. Like, I think with her new coaching staff, and she's even publicly commented on wanting to improve on, both sides of the ball as well. So, I mean, there's only like she can only rise higher. I mean, I don't think that in the future she doesn't have a chance of climbing those rankings, but it's definitely interesting to see. And then you go right from Clark to number 5, you go back to these post players. So Jonquil Jones comes in 5th in 2025. Alyssa Thomas is there, and then you go back to the guards of Sabrina Ionescu, Kelsey Plum, and Arike. So yeah, I think like this top 10 is pretty. I mean, I think the one that I'm surprised is that high is Kelsey Plum, just given like the fact that she had a little bit maybe of a, Las Vegas as a whole had a little bit of an off season last year. But yeah, when you look at these different who jumped in the rankings and stuff, is there anything else that like really surprises you about this top 10?
I mean, I'm with you on Plum rising from last year is
Mhm.
seems like a strange quirk of the voting. She didn't have that great of a season. Maybe our panel is sort of thinking she goes to LA, she's more of a featured player than she
Mm,
was in Vegas, and therefore her numbers will go up, so the production will increase. I think you can always argue about Arike. I argue
yeah,
about Arike a lot because a shooting percentage below 40% is always going to raise eyebrows. She's just not that efficient.
but she
So,
still finds a way to score. Like, she averaged, I think it was like 22 points a game last season. So,
but she
I
takes
mean, she's
a lot of shots to get there, which is all. Yeah, I mean, and yeah, it's going to be very interesting this season to see how she fits with Becca's and sort of the
mm,
newly remade roster in Dallas, and
mhm,
whether she can sort of restrain herself from that give me the ball and get out of the way kind of approach quite so much, because Dallas, to improve, need to be less of a sort of. I mean, I'm old, so the team always reminds me of is Allen Iverson with the
mm,
Sixers back in the day when they were a one-man offense. They gave him the ball, and that was what they did. They watched him go to work,
yeah,
and it got them to the finals one year. It got him an MVP, but they never won a title, and a lot of years they were pretty ordinary because there's a ceiling on you when that's your offense, and
yeah,
yeah, they need to diversify it. So I might not have her in the top 10, but I would inevitably still have her fairly high
yeah,
because there are only so many people in the world where you can throw them the ball like that and say, "Go get us a bucket," and they can do
literally.
it on the level that she can.
Yeah, and I think that, like, I think about her efficiency. I mean, Caitlin Clark is her efficiency is a little bit better, but she still makes a ton of shots. I mean, just based on last year, if we're thinking of that as the sample size. But like, yeah, it's just these offenses where you know that you have a dominant shooter, and so in late clock situations or in situations where the defense is giving you a hard time, you just kind of pass to them and let them do their thing. And obviously, it's not going to go in every single time. Sometimes it does, um, but yeah. So I mean, now that we're talking about the start of the season, so let's kind of shift in. I know your work on her hoop stats especially this time of the year, is all about like rosters, salary cap restrictions, who's going to make the final roster. So you've been writing previews over on Her Hoop Stats about each team and who's going to make these rosters. I know at the point that we're recording this, it's Wednesday. So I think that, like, obviously the next 24 hours is going to be really big when it comes to cuts because the rosters are literally due on Thursday. The season starts on Friday. So, we talked before we started recording about a few little, like, I wouldn't call them inconsistencies, but a few little, like, parts of these rosters that people might be confused about. So let's dive in first to the Las Vegas Aces because they really made news this week by cutting Deja Kelly. But now that their roster is complete, people might look and count and say, oh, they have 13 players. So, what's the situation over in Vegas?
Yeah, they're down to 13, but they're probably done, which is strange when we always tell people rosters have to be 11 or 12.
Hmm.
And it's because of a couple of years ago, they introduced a pregnancy/childbirth exception, where basically if a player is out for that reason, you get to replace them with a player on the minimum, and you can go over the cap to do it. It's a lot like the hardship exceptions that we see during the regular season when teams get multiple injuries and drop below 10 and can add a player. But you can do it from the start of the season, and you can do it by keeping a player through camp, an extra player. You don't have to cut them and then add someone back, which we may see other teams doing if they've got injuries going into the opening day. We saw it mostly in 2023 because I went back and read the previews I did back then, and there
Yeah.
were 4 teams who had pregnant players going into the start of the season.
Wow.
So we saw teams with 11 and an extra. We saw teams with 12 and an extra. There
Yeah.
were a lot of different situations around the league. So going back to what they did then, we now have an example for what Las Vegas are probably going to do now. Always with the caveat that the league changes their rules on a whim sometimes. So if no one's told me there's a new change to the rule, then we'll probably find that out over the next couple of days, and
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. But
And I
yeah,
mean,
it looks like Vegas are done.
yeah, and I mean the rules are definitely going to change with the CBA coming next season. So the things that are happening now are not going to be the things that happen next year. One thing that I want to keep talking about Vegas because it's been one of the biggest hot topics this week when it comes to rosters. So maybe explain the situation a little bit with Kirsten Bell's contract and the guarantee and the way that they had to cut Deja Kelly and Harmony Turner because of that. And what are really the restrictions of having, a player like Bell on a guaranteed contract? When did they decide that? Just, give some clarification on that.
Yeah, I mean, each team is allowed a maximum of 6 veteran protected contracts.
Mhm.
Aren't that many teams around the league who are actually at 6 this year because they've managed to restrain themselves from giving them out. But that's not what Bell is on. Bell is on the 4th year of a rookie scale contract. And one of the changes that came in the last CBA, the one that's about to end, was that when teams take out or exercise that 4th year, it becomes immediately protected. And a
Mhm.
protected contract means it's guaranteed, essentially. The player is going to get that money unless they get hurt in a separate league, like we've seen with Benijah Laney Hamilton or
Yeah.
Jordan Horston, Nika Mule in the offseason, in which case it changes
Yeah.
what teams can do with it. But otherwise, they get the money. So if Las Vegas wanted to cut Bell, they would have to pay her that whole sum unless she's willing to agree to a buyout. And in her case, there's very little reason to. So she gets her $84,543, whether she's on the roster or not. So they
Yeah.
can't really cut her and stay compliant within the cap and keep someone else. There are
Yeah.
other teams who can get away with cutting guaranteed contracts. Someone like Golden State or Washington at the moment, or Connecticut, have so much cap space that they could cut someone on a guaranteed deal, swallow the cost, and then sign someone else to fill that roster spot. But Vegas are tight enough, actually have $0 left even before their extra player. And so, yeah, they didn't have a lot of choice. They couldn't keep someone like Turner or their other cuts. Who else went right at the end?
Deja Kelly.
Oh, yeah, Deja Kelly went right at the end. So, yeah, they couldn't keep them instead of Bell, despite how questionable her first few seasons in the league may have been. The decision was made over a year ago
Yeah.
to exercise that 4th-year option. And yeah, I mean, they could have declined it. I think it was probably a toss-up, given how she played before then, whether they
Yeah.
wanted to exercise that option.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that I mean, we just saw this week Maddie Siegrist had the same thing happen where her 4th year was solidified, and so she'll be with Dallas for the 4 years of her rookie contract, and so that money's guaranteed. It's the same thing. You make these decisions over a year in advance to the contract, because I guess Kirsten Bell's contract, she's going into the her third and no fourth now.
She's
No, now it's
played 3
yeah,
going
so
into the 4th.
I'm
Yeah,
getting confused with her Maddie Siegrist. So Maddie Siegrist is going to her 3rd season, so they already guaranteed her contract for next year. Last
yeah,
year, Kirsten Bell was going into her 3rd season, so they already guaranteed her 4th year, which is this year.
yeah,
So, she'll be a free agent next season, but because a year ago they made these decisions, not knowing obviously that Deja Kelly in a year would come and impress so much as an undrafted signee. They didn't know that Harmony Turner would come and impress, and they you can't make though you can't like see into the future obviously and know what you're going to want a year from now. So you make that decision, and then you just have to deal with it. So I mean, regardless of how, if you were to compare who would make more impact on the roster, there's really nothing you can do, because especially in a situation like Kirsten Bell, with the league being so competitive, if she were to take a buyout, say as like Katie Lou Samuelson did with the Indiana Fever, if you take a buyout, Katie Lou Samuelson had a market of people who would
yeah,
potentially sign her. Kirsten Bell maybe doesn't, and so the idea of her agreeing to a buyout is probably not happening. Well, it is
yeah. I mean,
different.
most people who agree to a buyout do that because they know the amount that they're giving up, they can then go and get somewhere else. That's
Mhm.
the reason to agree to it. Yeah, I mean, talking about the options, we're actually about to hit this year's deadline for 4th-year options. It's the last day is tomorrow. It's 15th of
Oh,
May. So some teams have decisions coming up where they have to decide whether they want to take those 4th-year options. That's why we've seen a few in the recent days. We've got Haley Jones,
okay.
Letitia Amahir, Diamond Miller, uh, Grace Berger, Dorky Uhush, Niara Sabalis was exercised a couple of days
Yep.
ago. Then we got Jade Melbourne and Sika Kone are the ones I have
So,
on the list.
because Letitia Amahir was waived and then re-signed with the Valkyries, does that change anything? Like, is she still,
But
or like is she now on like a vet minimum?
no, the key part there is that she didn't clear waivers. They claimed her off waivers, in which case the exact same contract continues to exist.
There you
Um,
go.
it's when you clear and then are re-signed, then the initial contract disappears, so there would be no
There you
4th-year option.
Okay, so
And
yeah, I didn't realize
but
that
that's
Amahir
why
was waived.
Amahir and Berger both have their 4th year because she was claimed off waivers as well. So the option's
Nice.
still
Okay.
there.
Yeah, so if you're not sure what we're talking about with waivers, it's a team waives you, and then you have a certain amount of time. I think it's usually like 48 hours for another team to claim your contract. And if they claim your contract in that time, we say you get claimed off waivers, and they essentially just adopt your existing contract. So it's like they were traded or something. So yeah, so Letitia Amahir was claimed off waivers. Grace Berger in Minnesota, which it seems like she may be making the roster this season. So you're not sure?
I think Berger might be one of Minnesota's last cuts. Yeah.
Oh no,
I'm not
that's
sure she's going to stick.
devastating. Even with Dorka being suspended for the season?
Yeah, the way the maths works out, partly because Berger's still on that rookie scale contract, she
No.
still might not fit in the 12. But
Ugh.
yeah, Minnesota have some difficult decisions to make right at the
Mhm.
end there.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting into the point where they have difficult decisions. I kind of assume. I mean, this is what you get for assuming, because we're so close to the deadline, that most of the decisions are done. There's still so many cuts to make. I mean, Golden State, as of I think yesterday, last night when I was looking, still had about 18 players on their roster. So that's just going to be wild to see today. But yeah, so we have these rookie exceptions that are coming out. So you said the deadline is on Thursday, May 15th. I'm curious to see. I think I'm I feel like maybe Golden State might take Letitia Amihere. She really impressed. I mean, I'm gonna wave my little Canadian flag because she's like I've been high on her, and with Golden State maybe wanting to retain a few players, I think that might be a good option. But yeah, I mean we're getting into this conversation now of cuts. So like I talked about Golden State having a lot of cuts. Who in as of right now, we're talking, Wednesday at 11:30 in the morning. Who right now still has like a lot of really serious cuts to make on their rosters?
I think Minnesota, like we talked about, are one of the sort of most interesting ones because they're going to be cutting sort of recognizable names in that probably Berger, they might, and then either Peely or their second round pick, but their own highest pick, Kosu.
Yeah.
Somebody has to go to get
Yeah.
them down to 12 or maybe even to 11. It depends. The maths is so tight and players are on so many different numbers in Minnesota that you have to work out sort of which ones they can keep. There are certain permutations of 12 that work and certain permutations of 12 that don't because of the way the maths all adds up. We've got sort of 3 or 4 teams who are basically down. Phoenix are a bit complicated because they've had 2 players still in Europe while they've been going through camp. That presumably, I mean, Khadija Laksa, they gave guaranteed money, so she's definitely sticking on the roster.
Oop.
But presumably they like Musa as well, who's been in the French finals,
Yes.
which still aren't over. There's a game tonight, and it could go to a game 3 on Friday.
Oop.
So they've got to decide whether they like her enough, or maybe I would have to check the numbers whether they can temp suspend her. What we're going to see in Golden State probably is they'll keep at least 13 as well,
Mhm.
because they'll temporarily suspend Janelle Salon,
Mhm.
who hasn't shown up yet because she's been playing in the Italian finals,
Yeah.
which just ended a day or two ago.
Mhm.
She got the MVP in their finals, in fact.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, they'll be keeping at least 13, and it kind of looked like they knew who they were cutting in their last preseason games.
Yeah.
It looked like Chen was done, Kanan was done, Bibby's gone, and
Yeah.
then it's just a matter of whether you keep the all of the wings because they've got so many wings on that roster,
Yeah.
but or whether Linskens manages to stick as an extra post. But I mean, those of us who've watched a lot of international basketball are certainly interested in a lot of the pieces that Golden State have together. You got your namesake Carla Leight, who
Oh, my girl.
is uh, is an interesting prospect. Still only
Mhm.
21. Has just said she's not going to go to France for Eurobasket, so she's going to be
Yeah.
there all season,
Yep.
assuming they don't cut her, which I don't think they're
Yeah.
going to.
I don't think they're going
And
to.
and yeah, it's going to be fun to see how she can do at WNBA level. She's had a great season in France, done a lot of scoring, and yeah, it's an interesting roster for an expansion team that made some strange choices in the expansion draft, but has put together
Yes.
a lot of good players. They're going to be cutting some people that I wouldn't be surprised to see other teams interested in.
Well,
And
that's the thing is that with these teams that you have, we were talking on the podcast yesterday about Michaela Timpson and Jalen, I think it's Jalen Brown on Indiana. Like they could have kept both of them, but they would have had to waive Timpson, wait for her to clear waivers, and then sign her back on a vet minimum, which was Jamie was putting the numbers together. That was she had the math on that. They were like $3,000 short or something. And like then you risk her not claiming waivers and being taken by another team, and so that's where some of these teams are kind of in situations with hardship exemptions and being able to like bring players back is that you don't know if they're going to clear waivers. And yeah, so I think it's a risk you take. And some of these teams, I mean, I feel like Phoenix might be one that might be open to taking players on waivers. Connecticut definitely, like there's so many different options for these like pretty talented players to go. But yeah, it's Golden State is one that I'm definitely looking at because with these expansion teams, especially this year, I think Golden State is in a peculiar situation given that there's so many free agents next season. Like with next season happening with like a double expansion draft with all of these free agents, like I'm not sure if Golden State particularly is building for the next 5 to 10 years. I think they're building for like this year to kind of see what happens and then kind of go into the off season. But it's definitely curious to see how these expansion teams are deciding to kind of form their first roster, seeing what their game plans are in terms of how they're going to build their franchise. Just for me, like, I'm curious in Toronto because that's like the market I'm in. Is, do you also go with a more international roster, given that we're the first international team? Do you prioritize bringing some Canadians? Do you try and get top talent? It's definitely very interesting to see how these, and Portland. I was thinking the other day, I was like, Portland, like, because Portland and Toronto are on the same kind of track, and Toronto has like a name, and we're starting to do events, and I'm like, I haven't heard anything about Portland in months. So they're doing them, but
I
yeah,
mean,
it's
it got announced a little later, didn't it? So maybe
a little
they're sort of
later.
slower down the process. Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah, presumably
exactly.
we'll at least get a name and like a logo or something sometime soon.
Yeah, I'm like, we're a year out. We don't. It's just like the Toronto Tempo and the Portland team that we don't know the name of. So yeah, interested to see how that starts ramping up for them too. But like, yeah, another team that's like, where are you going to go in terms of roster decisions? And there's so many talented players in Europe. There's also so many talented players coming up from college. So it's, and there's so much, like, even Australia has a ton of interesting and talented players to come over as well. So it's I'm very curious how the next few years go of how these expansion teams decide to prioritize roster building.
Yeah, it has been a very strange time for expansion drafts and expansion teams because of what you say with the CBA ending and like 80% of the league being a free agent at the end of this season.
Yeah,
It's gonna the expansion draft's gonna be even stranger, assuming we have one for Toronto
yeah,
and Portland,
because I'm like,
because who's there going to be to pick? It's going to be a few rookies and sort of rights to players who didn't show up, and
mm,
yeah. So,
I
but
mean,
at the same time, you're going to have most of the league as free agents. So
yeah,
there's more shopping to be done in free agency. But what you get from the
exactly.
expansion draft could be a lot less than you would normally expect in a
Yeah,
typical year.
I mean, the contract situations better than I do, but like with Golden State, they still picked Monique Billings in the expansion draft despite her being a free agent. So like, is it possible for these teams to pick free agents and then just try and attract them because we're like, "Oh, we wanted you, like, come see what we got going on here."
You It's one of the few rules about an expansion draft in the CBA is that you can take one unrestricted free agent,
There we
and
go.
then the the expectation when they wrote that rule was that you would then immediately call them in order to retain their rights.
Okay.
But it's written so that it's an option, not something that you have to do. So what
Uh,
Golden State did was draft Billings and then not core her because they didn't want to guarantee her the supermax contract that comes with coring the player,
yeah,
and then they ended up signing her anyway. She was an unrestricted free agent who did not have to go to Golden State, despite the fact that they drafted her, and just went anyway. And is
yeah,
getting quite well paid, but did not get the supermax contract. I think she got about half of that in the end.
yeah, and it's for a player like her who has bounced around the league and hasn't been able to find, like, a solid place, I think the idea of getting, a guaranteed contract was probably, like, the big thing that got her over there, but, yeah, I mean, I'm since the expansion draft didn't go as, like, well for Golden State this year, I don't think I'm that upset that Toronto and Portland aren't really gonna get like a decent expansion draft, but at the same time, you can kind of take a few like rookie prospects or people like with the rights who could turn out to be really great players. So it's a little bit of a balance, and yeah, it's definitely, I think the contract situation, and who knows? The core exemption might not even exist next year. Like, we don't know what the CBA is going to, and I know a lot of these players aren't really happy with how the core designation has kind of worked out. I know there's players who are just kind of riding it out. I know there's players who have decided to not play because they've been cored. Like, there's so much politics that goes into it as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen quite a few times that players get caught and then asked to be traded,
Yep.
and sort of it's used more to make sure that you get value for a player that they can't walk away for nothing than
Yep.
necessarily to make sure that they can't leave.
Yeah.
Generally, in this league, when someone says they want to move, the teams work it out. I think
Hmm.
most of them view it as it's such a small league and everyone talks to each other. All the
Yeah.
players talk to each other, all the
True.
coaches talk to each other, that if you get a bad reputation as sort of the team that holds players to ransom or that won't work with players, then that's not worth what you're going to get out of that one negotiation. So yeah, if players want to move, then they generally will. And we've also seen a lot of players move to exactly the place they want to go to. Even if you say, I want to go to Vegas, I want to go to New York, then teams will work it out generally. Sometimes it'll take a year, sometimes there'll be some posturing. I mean, we saw Deladon wanted to go and Washington couldn't get anything done there, partly because Vegas had absolutely nothing to trade when they were on the list. But generally it works out, and the player gets to the destination they want because the teams are petrified. They're scared of getting a bad reputation because then you get no one in free agency. Team players don't want to go there.
I mean, you think about Connecticut, who, had this one thing come out about how their practice was taken over by like a toddler birthday party, and that's all anybody could talk about now for the rest of time. And now yesterday it comes out that they're selling the team. So like it's like you said, it's such a small league. News travels so fast. There's such like a dedicated, like passionate core of fans who are like willing to kind of like stand up for these players and be like, no, like blah, blah, blah. And especially because now we're seeing such a disparity in how players are treated. There's some owners who are just like pouring money into facilities and recovery and all that. And then when you have a team that doesn't, they kind of just get like the big stamp of like, do better, like we're disappointed in you kind of stuff. So yeah, it's I guess one of the growing pains of a league that's growing as fast as the WNBA is that like if your ownership isn't keeping up, you're going to get absolutely destroyed online, which I mean we're both familiar with being destroyed online.
Yeah, I mean part of the point of the CBA used to be to keep things fair for the small market teams. In that sort of that's why there's a hard salary cap. That's why charter flights weren't allowed because then some big owner couldn't come in and spend all the money and make the smaller teams and the smaller owners irrelevant.
Yeah, happened anyway.
I think yeah. What we're seeing now, I think, is the super rich owners coming in and the lower end being forced to step up rather than using the rules to make the super rich owners come down to the level of the ones who have less money. I mean, we're still usually talking about millionaires, so it's not like they're needing to chip for coins down the back of the sofa. But yeah, it's going to be. I mean, then we get into a whole new discussion about what's going to be in the next CBA, which hopefully they get done and we don't get a lockout or a strike. But yeah, one way or another, hope we get some kind of agreement.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation for a whole other day. But yeah, so we're heading in now to the season. It's definitely going to be a very, I'm struggling with the word, chaotic, interesting, newsworthy season. There's so many different agendas happening, whether it's the on-court product, everything that's happening off the court, the CBA, all of that stuff. But I mean, we've already been yapping for almost 40 minutes. So the good thing is that a whole other crew of people will be coming onto the Her Hoop Stats podcast to talk about that daily, every day. We're going to be switching it up. So, yeah, we're going to kind of cap it here. If you haven't checked out Ranking the W or the pieces that have gone along with it, make sure to check out the links down below wherever you're listening or watching. Make sure to subscribe to Her Hoop Stats so that you get every single one of our podcasts every single day for the next 5-6 months of the WNBA season. And also make sure to go subscribe to the Her Hoop Stats newsletter. Comes to your inbox every single day. And if you're wondering, I mean, who's staying on the caps, who is being cut from the roster, our Her Hoop Stats team cap sheets are one of the best, if not the best, source for up-to-date roster decisions and salary cap numbers and all that. So just head to herhoopstats.com to figure out, get all of your information and stats there. But Richard, it was so nice to, launch this new era of our podcast together. And I'm sure you and I will be hanging out, a couple of times a week for the next few months. But where can the people find you and find your work this week?
Well, on the places that you just publicized, it's all going to be coming out on the Her Hoop Stats newsletter. I've got assuming I get them finished and teams actually finish off their rosters so that I can write them, I've got articles coming out sort of breaking down the opening day rosters,
Yeah.
sort of how many players teams have kept, what sort of cap space they've got left, which should be coming out Friday and maybe Saturday if we break it into 2 articles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's about it. And then other stuff, I'll be appearing here. I'll be writing stuff throughout the season, I imagine.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you very soon. Thanks for listening.